It almost felt as though there was something waiting for me in the darkness, and as I reached the bottom floor, I tore at the light, flooding the basement in a dull orange glow. His only answer was another quiet growl deep in his throat. I said, and I turned and looked down into the shadows of the room and closed the door, banishing the evil from my mind. After a few hours of sleep, I awoke suddenly as if something was wrong. My room was still dark, so it had to be nighttime. Something loud in the house crashed, and I sat up in a hurried way. When I returned the bucket to the spot, I noticed something out of place. The door to the basement was slightly open. I swore I had closed it behind me when I came back up. There lay Scout, his blood draining from multiple wounds all over his body. His face was twisted and angry, as if he had died fighting to his last breath. Welcome to another episode of Drawing and Telling Intense and Horror Stories with Mr. Beast. We have a dark one today. Here we go, guys. Enjoy. The night where my world ended. Drip, drip, went the rain as it leaked from the roof. My father and I had only recently taken up residence in an old stately manor on the outskirts of a small town. Our only neighbor was directly across the street, an affable couple, although they were later on in their years. The rest of the land surrounding our two houses was full of decrepit old farming fields and nightmare-inducing dead forests full of unhappy-looking trees. Drip, drip, went the rain as it leaked from the roof into the bucket I had placed underneath to catch the water. I hated this house. It was old and dreary, full of holes and drafty rooms which always seemed to have a smell of musty and rotting things, no matter how many times my father and I had scrubbed them. My cell phone rang shrilly, scaring me out of my revelry of better times at my old home with my old friends. Now my only friend was my faithful dog. Scout was an older dog with gray showing in his fur around his face. As I answered the phone, Scout put his face in my lap, letting me scratch behind his ears. "Hello," I answered, knowing only one person who had my new number. "Hi, sweetie. Just calling to let you know that I won't be home until very late tonight. A convict has escaped during transportation tonight, and the sheriff has asked all of us deputies to help out," my father said through the telephone to me. "That's fine. Scout and I have already eaten and we're planning on going to bed soon," I said tiredly as I rubbed at my eyes. "Okay, just make sure to lock the doors. Also, if you could check the basement door. It's been blowing open in the wind recently. Just make sure to lock it tight," my father said in a tone like I was still a child. After some more small talk, I hung up the phone and checked the two doors on the main floor of our new house. With a click, I locked them both. The front and the back door locked easily under my guidance. I turned to find Scout scratching at the basement door. I had purposely spent little time in the basement as it was a scary and desolate part of the house that always smelled of rot and mildew more than the rest of the old house. "Come on, Scout," I said as I opened the basement door. Darkness greeted me, and I hesitated. From the light of the kitchen, I could see the bare bulb and chain at the bottom of the stairs. I propped the door open slightly with a stool from the counter so that I wouldn't be plunged into sudden darkness, and Scout and I made our way down into the foul-smelling dungeon of our miserable house. It almost felt as though there was something waiting for me in the darkness, and as I reached the bottom floor, I tore at the light, flooding the basement in a dull orange glow, chasing away any shadows from the room. As I reached the back door, my hand reached out to check the lock when a strong gust of wind knocked the door open, smacking me roughly in my extended hand. With a curse, I wrestled the door against the wind and managed to barely slam it shut and lock the door tightly. As I turned to retreat back upstairs, I noticed Scout was staring into one of the few remaining shadowed corners. A pile of our boxes from our move were stacked there in a large lump. Scout's fur stood straight up, and he growled lightly at some unseen thing in the corner. "Found a mouse, boy?" I asked as I went to stand next to him. His only answer was another quiet growl deep in his throat. I said and tugged on his collar towards the staircase back into the better part of the... With some effort, I was able to pull the dog to the stairs and pull him up after me. As I went to close the door, I realized I had forgotten to turn the light off in the basement. With a sigh, I resolved myself to return downstairs and switch the light off. Scout waited for me at the top of the stairs as I made my way quickly down the stairs and pulled the cord. With a dash, I ran back up the stairs like a child fleeing the dark. When I reached the kitchen, I turned and looked down into the shadows of the room and closed the door, banishing the evil from my mind. With all the doors locked, I made my way upstairs with Scout and got ready for bed. After I was ready, I made my way into my bedroom where Scout had taken his normal spot directly under my bed. I had laid out some blankets for him so that it was like we were sharing a bunk bed. I put my hand down and Scout licked at it briefly before we both settled down for the night. After a few hours of sleep, I awoke suddenly as if something was wrong. My room was still dark, so it had to be nighttime. "Dad?" I called out to the empty house and received no answer. The clock on my bedside table read 12:09. I settled back down into bed and let my hand hang off the bed. Scout licked at my fingers again for a minute before we both fell into a deep sleep. Something loud in the house crashed, and I sat up in a hurried way as a lightning bolt cut across the sky outside my window, offering a flash of light in my dark bedroom. I wondered if I had imagined it and got out of bed, leaving Scout, who was already a lazy dog, under the bed. I made my way out into the hall and listened intently to the noises of the house, hoping to hear what had made the noise. Nothing but silence greeted me until very faintly I heard the drip, drip of water coming from the leak in the living room. I decided to go check the bucket I had placed and found it very near to full. So quickly I took the bucket to the kitchen and emptied it into our sink. When I returned the bucket to the spot, I noticed something out of place. The door to the basement was slightly open. I swore I had closed it behind me when I came back up. So I went over and stared down into the darkness of the basement. "Scout?" I called out into the basement, thinking maybe the dog had gone back down hunting that mouse from earlier. Nothing responded, and I hesitated to shut the door when I heard a noise coming faintly from below. Drip, drip went the sound, but being too fearful, I closed the door quickly and resolved myself to check the leak tomorrow when it was sunny. I returned to my room and got under my blankets. I reached my arm under the bed, and after a moment, I felt hair under my fingers and the tongue of my faithful companion as he woke just long enough to lick my fingers. The clock read 1:48, and I closed my eyes, letting sleep take me once more. For the third time that night, I was woken by something loud downstairs. Voices sounded before I heard my name being called. The clock on my bedside table read 3:37, and I reached under my bed where Scout dutifully licked at my fingers. With the courage he gave me, I made my way out of my room and into the lit-up living room. Red and blue lights flashed outside the front door, and I hesitated at the top of the stairs before my father called me down in a panicked manner. Our house held at least a dozen uniformed policemen, all searching the area. "What's going on?" I asked as my father crushed me in a big hug. "Oh, thank God. I was so worried when we found Scout. I thought the worst happened," my father said, slightly muffled as he hugged me tighter. "Found Scout? What do you mean? He's upstairs under my bed. He was just licking my hand before I came down," I said, confused. My father glanced at me, fear deep in his eyes, as he led me to the couch in our living room. "Drip, drip," went the leak as I peered behind the couch and started crying immediately. There lay Scout, his blood draining from multiple wounds all over his body. His face was twisted and angry, as if he had died fighting to his last breath. His blood dripped quietly as it fell through the old wooden floor into the basement below. Drip, drip, it went as I dropped to my knees. I don't understand. Scout was just upstairs with me. He just licked my hand like he always does, I said, incredulous to the officers surrounding me. My father answered slowly as he made his way upstairs with a few of the other officers. My father loaded his revolver one bullet at a time with such care it seemed out of place in the chaos of the world. Humans can lick too,